Hey YouTube, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to get an elite ground contact time if you want to have an elite sprint time. So before I actually talk about how to get one and how to fix the problems, I first want to talk about what ground contact time is and why it's so important. So ground contact time is the period between when your foot first touches the floor and the millisecond after it leaves the ground, which shouldn't be long. There's barriers to this as well, but before I get to that, I just want to talk about the fact that if you can get your ground contact time as low as possible, maybe even as low as physically possible, then you're going to be extremely quick. A lot of people, they fail to go below 0.1, and there's a couple of reasons why that is, like overstriding for one and the angle of their force production. Those are the two main ones. But if you can go below 0.1, what ends up happening is you're quick as consistently in a race, not just like one step below 0.1. As long as you can stay consistently below there, you're going to become world class. Most people who have a 0.1 ground contact times, they aren't any faster than 11 seconds. If they were able to go below 11 seconds, they, for at least a couple of steps, would have had a ground contact time below 0.1. And if they did, that's great, because by that point they should have figured out why their ground contact time was at 0.1. They should still be focusing on their ground contact time, and they should be working on getting it low. There are a lot of different things to focus on when you're sprinting, but I personally think that getting your ground contact time low is one of the most important things, because you don't even need a lot of muscle to be an elite sprinter. It's not even about genetics in a sense, though obviously genetics do play a role. If you want to be like sub 10, if you have poor genetics, it's probably not going to happen. You might be able to go 9.99 at best somehow, but if you have poor genetics, you probably won't see a time with a 9 at the very front before the decimal. If you do, I don't know how you did it, but please share your story, because that's impressive, but most likely it won't happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't be fast, because a lot of people, like, they put in all this work and they complain about how they're just not fast. I've done this and I'm not as fast as him who has been doing less work than me or hasn't even been training and all this other stuff. Usually it's because you have a training in the wrong direction, or you're not focusing on enough on the things that are actually important. A lot of people are slow, put a lot of focus on being in the gym, doing plyometrics, though plyometrics are very important, but they don't look at stuff like ground contact times, because your ground contact time is the only period where you produce force, and producing maximal force in as little time as possible is extremely important, especially when you consider the fact that the lower your ground contact time is, the more force you're able to produce, so you can actually get off the ground, which just automatically makes you fast. Now for the barriers. Just like with going sub 12, 11, 10, and I mean, no one's gone sub 9 yet, but someday, with going sub 9, just like how those are all barriers, then the same thing with ground contact time, and obviously getting a below 0.1 consistently in one race would be equivalent to getting sub 11. If you somehow did that and you didn't go sub 11, then I don't even know how that's even possible. I don't even think that is possible, but if you was to get a ground contact time of 0.1, no, so not that, but less than 0.1 consistently throughout a race, you should go at least 10.99, and the more you do it, the lower down your time's going to get. The second barrier would be 0.09, 8, and then 7. I don't think anyone's ever gone sub 7. Even Usain Bolt, he usually ranges between one leg at 0.07 and another leg at 8. So if he was able to go with both legs at 7, or one leg below 7, or both legs below 7, you should be able to beat Usain Bolt's world record, just to prove the point. Now let's actually get into the first point, which is overstriding. Overstriding is usually the biggest reason why people have high ground contact times, because a lot of people think they don't overstride, but that's not true. A lot of people overstride, and it's extremely of an easy mistake to make. The reason being is you're supposed to land on your center of mass, but until you've actually landed under your center of mass once, you'll never know how that feels. You'll never actually know how that feels to land on your center of mass, because it just feels so weird. When you do it, you understand that you've definitely done something right, because you just come off the ground just like that. You just fly, essentially. Even if you don't put much force into the ground, you're already off the ground, and then you propel forwards. So let's use this pen as an example. Say right here is your center of mass. You land here and you come here and you're off the ground. That's it. That's it. Your foot literally moves inches backwards. You feel your glutes squeeze, then you're off the ground. Problem is, a lot of people don't feel that. What ends up happening is they land here when their center of mass is here or somewhere in between, and they pull their leg with their hamstrings this way, and then they get to underneath the center of mass where they're now actually producing force, and they do the same thing. And they just feel their stride go really long and like, yeah, I'm making so much ground. And then they get past, or they just look back and they realize that they weren't actually going as fast as they thought they were. And it's because they were overstriding. The problem with overstriding is when you do it, your foot lands, and the force that was in your foot that you generate from your hips down all the way into your feet, it gets put here and your body just recoils backwards a bit, and there's a braking force, and every single millisecond you're on the ground for, there's more and more braking force. Obviously, if you land here, that's quite good, but it's not here. You still have a lot of braking force. Even if you land here, there's braking forces, but it's much less, much less. And whilst this happens, your hamstrings have to fire and they bring you back. Once they brought you back, a lot of the power you generated has been dispersed because it's been put into the ground over here when it should have been here. And also the fact that you've been braking as well. So everything you just built up with the steps before has just essentially been dispersed, and now you're back here, and then now you're probably going to have to fire from your muscles instead of your tendons because, I mean, you just used up all of the elastic potential that was in your body over around here, wherever you landed. Maybe you didn't land here, but maybe you landed here. Regardless, as long as you didn't land here, you've wasted energy, and then you produce that, and then you just go that small amount. What's supposed to happen is you're supposed to do this repeatedly, and it's literally just that quick. You just feel your foot just tap the ground, tap the ground. You barely have time to even compute you're on the ground because you're just off it, just like that. You just land and then you're gone. You land and then you're gone. It's like I said, overstriding is a really easy mistake to make, purely because if you've never strided correctly, you don't know you're overstriding until you feel it. So a lot of people think they're not overstriding until they get taught they are and they fix it, if they manage to fix it. And the easiest way to fix overstriding is by using A-skips. And before we get into A-skips, you need to understand two things. When you do sprinting or the A-skips, you want to fire from your hips and your glutes. You want to fire from the hip of the leg that's being raised up, and you want to fire the glute of the leg that's on the ground. And you want this to happen instantaneously the second you hit the ground. If you overstride when you're doing the A-skips, what you're going to notice is, first of all, you're probably going to break your hips, so your knees are going to be bent. But second of all, you won't feel your glute fire. It won't happen instantaneously, but it'll be like you land and then click. You feel the glute instantly. It just squeezes, and then when that happens, when you stride correctly, you're just going to be propelled forwards by the smallest margins. Well, not the smallest margins, but a lot more than before. But you're going to notice that it's much easier for you to move forwards. If you do A-skips incorrectly, what ends up happening is you usually have this bounce where your foot lands. Like, say this is my center of mass, your foot lands and then it corrects, and then you move forwards. Your foot lands, it corrects, you move forwards. Lands, correct, forwards. Lands, corrects, forwards. Every single time. But if you do the drill properly, what ends up happening is you land here and here, and you just keep going forwards. You might have a slight bounce, but each bounce, you're still going forwards. I mean, if you do the double bounce, you're still just going to go forwards with each bounce. Or you might just go forwards once and then stop. I can't really think of how exactly I do it because I'm not doing A-skips right now. But one of those is one of the ways I just said it is usually how it happens. And even if you don't do a bounce, you just raise one leg and then you just quickly bring it down. What you should notice is that you're just going to quickly go forwards, very quickly, as long as you land correctly underneath you. If you don't, when that happens, you're going to have to force yourself to move forwards. You shouldn't have to force yourself. If you're forcing yourself, you're firing from your muscles. You want to fire from your tendons. So make sure you do these A-skips and you feel the glutes. The easy way to do that is actually look in a mirror from the side and actually see where your foot lands. Don't even do the A skips at full speed. Literally just raise your leg and then bring it down. What you want to happen is, say this is the foot that's already on the ground. You want to land here, where my fingertips are your toes. You want to land here. This is where your other foot is. This is where this foot is. You want to land here. This should be where your center of mass is. If you're landing here or here, you're doing it wrong. You want to land right here. As long as you land right here, doing it slow. When you try and do it fast, as long as that also happens, you're actually just going to feel yourself go forwards. Now, the next thing would be the angle of your force production. Again, to fix this, you just need to do A skips. But before I get into that, a lot of people when they sprint, they hammer into the ground. They go down. You don't want to go down. You want to go back. You just want to move back. Though when you do that, it's quite easy to overstride again. But because of doing the A skips and feeling how all of this feels, you should be able to stop it from occurring. Because especially you with trying to get this right, you want to try and land with your heels first when you do the A skips. When you do that, you're going to notice, obviously it sounds weird listening to right now because like you're never supposed to land on your heels first. But when you do the A skips at full speed, what you're going to notice is you don't land on your your heels, you're going to land on your midfoot. And when that happens, this is one of the easiest ways to make sure that you land correctly. You're just going to propel forwards again. You're just going to propel forwards even more than before because you're landing correctly. You're not on your toes, you're on your midfoot because you're trying to land on your heels, but your foot's actually going to correct before you get onto the ground. And when that happens, you're just going to go forwards. And the reason why we want to try and land with our heels first is because if you try to land with your heels first, you're not going to try and go down. You're going to have to go back. Your foot's going to be dorsiflexed and you're just going to go back. Then your foot, before it lands, is going to fix. Same way how if I try to get my, I don't even know, my wrist to touch my fingers, my foot, by going back, my foot's just going to land like this. It's the same thing that's going to happen to your feet. Your foot's automatically going to get corrected and you're going to land with your midfoot. Then you're going to go back, just like that. And as long as you keep practicing these A skips with these thoughts in mind, quite quickly, you're going to realize that you've been overstriding, you've been doing it wrong. And another thing is, you're probably, part of the reason why you're overstriding is because you might be quad dominant or you're just using your quads too much. So what ends up happening is you sprint and then you land in front of you because your quads are straightening out your foot or your entire leg. And you don't want that to happen. You want obviously to be underneath here. And by doing this, you're going to feel yourself having to be forced to stop over compensating for weaknesses in your body and a bunch of other stuff and actually land with your heels. Well, not with your heels, but land by using the right muscles, by trying to land on your heels, land on your midfoot, and actually land underneath you instead of in front of you. Because if you try and land with your heels in front of you, whilst you're sprinting, go try that out. You're going to see it's not only is it basically impossible, your body just won't let you do it. It just feels weird. So as long as you learn how to do this with your A skips and the A drills, you're going to quickly be able to understand how to do it. And then after that, you can go on the track and actually practice this. Because these aren't just things that you're just supposed to just do on drills. Aren't supposed to be things that you just do and get good at and then hope that you can sprint good as well. They're supposed to be teaching your body how to sprint on the track. So as long as you can figure out how to do the drills correctly and then actually transfer what you do on these drills onto sprinting, you're going to be able to get faster. And once you've done that, your ground contact time is going to go down. Because if you actually compare how you sprint to how someone who actually has a low ground contact time does, one of my favorite ones to look at would be Asafa Powell. Look at his 9.72 world record time. When he done that race, you'd notice if you just like slow down the video, his foot straightens out in front of him and just comes back. Then his foot lands here, he goes here, and he's off, just like that. He's gone, just like that, just like that. His foot straight, like maybe here, not here, here. Because if his foot's here, he might not be able to drag it back fast enough, and he's probably not really producing much force. So it literally straightens out right in front of him, goes back a bit, it touches the floor here, goes back a bit, and he's off. But best person who's done it obviously would be Usain Bolt. So you can also look at him as well. But if you, regardless which one you check, you're gonna realize that it's literally just taps them off the ground extremely fast. There's obviously other things that go into having low ground contact at the time and being as fast as them, but making sure you can figure this out is really important. Now, I want to quickly reiterate the importance of the glutes because I don't think I have properly. So you actually sprint. Elite sprinters actually sprint with their glutes more than other sprinters do because this is actually one of the main muscles that make you move fast. And if you're not able to fire from it, you won't be able to move fast. Part of the reason why your ground contact time is high because you're not using your glutes. Usually, sprinters don't use their glutes. They have high ground contact times purely because they're not using one of the most important muscles that actually make you fast. If you don't fire from it, you're not going to be able to be fast. And the reason you don't fire from it is because you overstride and you end up overcompensating with other muscles like your hamstrings. Because when you overstride, your hamstrings have to drag your foot back. That also increases the risk of injury for your hamstrings because they're not supposed to be doing that in front of your center of mass. They're supposed to be doing that underneath you. And if you do that, your body is just gonna hamstrings. They're just not gonna let your glutes fire because they're just gonna be doing all of the work. What you should be able to do is actually feel your glutes squeeze and clench every single time you sprint. Maybe not consciously whilst you're doing it, but if you was to focus on it, you should be able to feel it. A great way to try and figure out how to actually sprint with your glutes would be, again, skips. Do everything I just said, but actually squeeze your glutes before you propel forwards. You should actually feel your body just go that way, just really, really quickly. Barely any effort as well, just literally one simple thing. And once you start doing this, try it again on the track and you'll actually feel your glutes burn for like the very first time in maybe years. And the only reason I say maybe years is because if you're a 400-meter sprinter, then you've definitely felt this pain before. Maybe not as, maybe it was probably worse when you was doing the 400, but when you're doing it now, it'll just be like a slight discomfort. I don't know how it's gonna feel for 100 or 200-meter sprinters because 400 is a different game if you don't really know how to do it properly and you have all these problems. But you should be able to feel your glutes muscles, just the muscle fibers trying to reconnect and rebuild back again because you're actually using them for once, which you've probably never really been doing much. If you like my video, like the video, let me know in the comment section below. Check the description because anything I forget to say in the video, I always put in the description. And if you like my content, subscribe. Helps the channel out a lot. I post every 2 days at 1 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. If you don't know when that is, just hit the bell and then you'll be notified instantly.